Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. Alhamdulillah, this is now episode 59 of the podcast The Forward with myself, Brother Matthew Locke, author of The Big Step. And today's episode is about the topic of a relationship with Allah. It's based on an article I wrote 2.5 years ago called Building a Relationship with Him, which I have linked below. And I decided to do this topic. Well, number one, I've been wanting to do this for a long time, but I also think that it follows on nicely, or is at least connected to, the previous podcast on epistemology and the nature of reality, especially the points that I made about, or the points that were made about Islam being the religion of truth, whether you like it or not, or whether any individual, any human being likes it or not, it is the truth, which means that Allah is Allah. Allah is the Lord and creator of all, whether you or anyone else likes it or not. So the subtitle of this article is, do you know someone who has their own relationship, quote unquote, with Allah? So let's go into the details. And this is something that is common amongst unbelievers, but a lot of Muslims can or have and do take on the trappings of this, or some of the trappings of this. And they profess Islam, but they have a sort of a weird relationship with Allah in the sense that they set the terms and expectations. Let's get into the topic at hand. So this is what I wrote. When explaining Islam to those who are not of the faith, i.e. they're not Muslims, it's common to come across people who claim to have their own relationship with the Lord. They claim that the Lord, quote unquote, they worship doesn't expect or demand certain things from them, and that when they pray or supplicate to this quote unquote Lord, it answers them or makes them feel better. Maybe their faith in this quote unquote Lord has a positive effect and makes them better people. So the question they will present to you is, what's wrong with what I'm doing? They might even try to present themselves as being objective, using expressions like, God isn't like that, or God doesn't need you to do that. And what I said to that was, really? And I've had this experience myself, especially with certain, I remember that back in the days, not long after I accepted salvation, I used to have these discussions with some people who were /Christian /secularist, especially people in the academic field. And to me, they come across as just insufferably arrogant people, because they're trying to tell you who the Lord is, but they have no revelation, no scripture, no text, nothing. They're going purely off of feelings and emotions. Oh, why are you like that? Why are you restricting this? Why are you not letting yourself do this? Why are you binding yourself to this and that and this and that? So that's a huge problem. But let's get into the points that come up here. So what I said was, we'll put this in points so that this answer is focused and coherent. Although the true Lord is above comparison and cannot be likened to his creation, your relationship with him does have parallels with human relationships. I just remember now, when I talked to one of these people, this is going back, 17 years or something, talking to one of these people. I mean, one of these arrogant intellectuals who was saying to me, oh, God's not like this, God's not like that. And I thought, why are you talking about the Lord as if he's your Sunday afternoon tennis partner? I mean, that's literally how it comes across. They don't talk about the Lord as if he is majestic, as if he is mighty. They talk about him as if he's like an older brother or something, or a buddy. It's very, very degrading and insulting if you think about it. But anyway, here it is. Why do human relationships break down? How often have you heard someone after or in the process of a breakup say he or she doesn't love me for who I am, or she is always comparing me to so and so? A person in this situation has been undervalued and underappreciated. They have loved someone and expected love in return, but that reciprocal love has been found deficient, wanting, or thoroughly misplaced. This person maybe had to work extra hard or even act unlike themselves just to get a small portion of that reciprocal love. Okay, so this is a lot of the time why a human relationship breaks down. Someone feels that they are not being loved for who they are, right? So their husband or their wife or even their boyfriend, their girlfriend, whatever it is, they always feel, well, I'm always being compared to someone else. And it even happens between parents and children. It's like, why am I always being compared to my older brother? Why am I always being compared to my little sister? Why am I always being compared to, so and so's ex-husband or so and so's ex-wife? How come I'm not just being appreciated for who I am? So that's why relationships fail a lot of the time. Why do relationships succeed? Relationship success is essentially down to A, expectations of both parties being clearly elucidated, and B, those expectations being met. For example, children expect food, clothing, shelter, and emotional support from their parents. Parents, in turn, expect loyalty, respect, and obedience. If a child's expectations are not met, if they're not given the attention and emotional support they need and crave, obedience to parents will not be forthcoming, and the relationship starts to break down. And I think I've mentioned this before in blogs and podcasts. I mean, my experience as a school teacher is, especially in the case of boys, like a boy craves his father's attention. A boy wants his dad to spend time with him, to take him out, to play sports with him, to talk to him, to acknowledge his achievements and stuff like that. And simple material things never suffice. So the boy, he might, he'll have his food, he'll have his clothing, his shelter, these basics. He might have the latest gadgets, the nicest phone, the nicest basketball sneakers or football shoes, whatever it is. So he's well taken care of in those material aspects. But because his dad's not actually there as a person, his dad's not talking to him, his dad's not spending time with him, his dad's not really acknowledging him, the relationship's not there. And what you find is that, and I've just seen this with myself, just my own eyes, how you can have a boy who's at school, he's acting up, he's breaking windows, or he's getting into fights, he's having altercations with teachers, with other students, and so on and so forth. And then his dad comes in to speak to the school, to speak to the administration or the teachers or whoever it is. And the kid's you can see he's almost happy about it. He's like, finally, I'm making my dad notice me now. And you have to advise the dad and say, well, listen, just spend some time with your kid. Talk to him. Take him out. Do something with him. And the dad, I've seen this sadly, where some dads get, what's the word? Just incredulous at this idea. You're like, what? Spend time with my kid? I'm busy. I work 7 days a week. I'm providing. I'm doing this and this. I'm like, yeah, that's not what your son really needs from you. Yeah, thanks, you're covering the basics, but he needs you to have a relationship with him. So, and I've seen what happens was when one dad actually takes that advice. I've seen a dad take that advice and say, you know what, okay, fine. I'll take my son out for a walk tonight, or we'll go maybe out for a meal or something. I'll spend some time with him. And then the next day at school, what do you see? The behavior is totally different. The son no longer feels the need to act up or do anything because he doesn't need to get attention from anywhere else. His dad's giving him attention. It's a huge thing. It's a huge thing, but it's just overlooked, sadly. I continued here. I said, this applies to husbands and wives, and even applies to consumers and producers. Consumers always expect the goods or services that they have paid for. Yeah, they always expect the goods or services that they have paid for in terms of both quality and quantity. Producers always expect to be compensated for the goods they have levied and the services they have rendered. If expectations are not made clear, or if they are altered arbitrarily, the result is confusion and anxiety. This is not a healthy relationship to be in, because sometimes you can be in a relationship with, could be with a spouse, could be with parents, could be with an employer, and their expectations just change randomly, and you never know, right? Like the dress code changes from this to that, and you don't know. The working hours change like this and that. The presentation style for certain things changes from time to time, or just what I mean is arbitrarily, right? You're not. It's like the expression in English we say, the goalposts keep moving. The goalposts keep moving, and that just makes someone stressed. It's like, well, I don't understand. How am I supposed to keep this person happy when on one day this thing makes him happy, but on another day it makes him absolutely furious? And that is a really, really unhealthy relationship to be in. This is usually what you would find with someone who's what's called in Anglosphere psychology, narcissistic personality disorder. Someone who just, they have that sense of entitlement, and it's just whatever they like, whatever they prefer, whatever they approve of at that moment in time, and they can just change it whenever they want. They'll just change their expectation, and if you get it wrong, you're going to suffer the consequences because you're supposed to know. A very, very unhealthy relationship to be in. So, this is human relationships. Point 3. Has the true Lord made clear who he is? The answer is obvious. I could quote large sections of the Qur'an to you, but Ayatul Kursi will do. The Lord says, Allah, there is no God but him, the living, the self-sustaining. He is not subject to drowsiness or sleep. Everything in the heavens and the earth belongs to him. Who can intercede with him except by his permission? He knows what is before them and what is behind them, but they cannot grasp any of his knowledge save what he wills. His footstool encompasses the heavens and the earth, and their preservation does not tire him. He is the Most High, the Magnificent. Point 4. Has the true Lord made clear his expectations? He says, I am Allah. There is no God but me. So worship me and establish the prayer to remember me. And this is Surah Al-Taha, the 20th chapter, verse 14. The true Lord's expectations, what pleases him and displeases him, are in his rulings. In his book, and on the tongue of his messenger, may Allah bless him and grant him peace, he has explained your obligations, what you are prohibited from doing, and what you are allowed to do. Therefore, with the above 4 points in mind, is anyone in a position to tell the true Lord, the creator and originator of the universe, who he is and what his expectations are? Meaning, are you in a position, after Allah has revealed himself to you, he's revealed his expectations to you, his commands, his prohibitions, what's halal, what's haram, what's wajib, and so forth. After he's revealed all this to you, are you in a position to say to Allah, no, this is who you are, and no, this is what you demand of me, and this is what you expect of me? What is this? What is this? So the question is this: isn't such a person, if you do that to Allah, and you try to tell Allah who he is and what his expectations are, aren't you failing to love Allah? Aren't you failing to love Allah for who he is? You're not loving Allah for who he is. You're trying to change who Allah is and what his expectations are. Those who worship the Lord in their own way are not worshiping the true Lord at all, but a deity of their own making, a god in their heads, so to speak. And what kind of God allows attributes and expectations to be imposed upon him? And this reminds me of, I'll put the link below. There's a statement it goes back to a statement I found. I'm not going to put this below. I'm put a video below, but there's a statement in it's the book Al-Fath al-Rabbani by Imam Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, radiyallahu anhu, rahimahullah, where he's advising people on spiritual matters, and he says at one point he's scolding someone or someone in the gathering. I forget the actual context, but he says what your problem is that you want another Lord. Like you're struggling with so many things. He says what your problem is that you want another Lord. You're not happy with this Lord. You want another one. And that reminded me of a video clip I came across with the most famous, which he's if not the most famous evolutionary biologist nowadays, Richard Dawkins. I mean, he's one of them, if he's not the most famous one. And there's an interview with, it was part of a documentary that I think it was named Ben Stein. I'll put the video below, put a link below. And what Ben Stein does in this interview is this clip, it's only, I think, 8 minutes or less. He shows that because Richard Dawkins writes his book called the God Delusion, and trying to say God doesn't exist and the Lord doesn't exist. And what Ben Stein shows in this short little clip is that Richard Dawkins' real problem is that he doesn't like this Lord. That's his problem, or the Lord that he's been given information about, i.e., in the books that he has access to, namely, the Old Testament, the New Testament, and so forth. What's called the Bible. So Ben Stein sort of drags it out of him and gets him to admit that he allows for the possibility of intelligent design. He says it's very likely that there's a higher order or a higher intelligence that made us. He actually allows for that. So Ben Stein, in his commentary, he says, right, so Richard Dawkins allows for the possibility of intelligent design, but he doesn't like this designer. That's the problem. He doesn't like this designer. So Ben Stein, what I gathered, he starts asking him more questions, and I think it's kind of tongue in cheek. He's kind of making fun of him, but he says, "Okay, so you don't believe in the God of the Old Testament. What about the other ones? What about the Muslim God? Do you believe in Allah? What about the Hindu gods? What about other religions, and so on and so forth?" And Dawkins looks a bit flustered and a bit sort of shocked. Like, what kind of stupid question is that to ask me? But what I think Ben Stein is trying to get at is, okay, well, if you don't like this God, does that mean that we're allowed to sort of shop around? Is that what we're supposed to do? Shop around and find a God that you like, a God that suits your needs and wishes? Let's look at the Hindu gods. Maybe one of them is good for me. Is that what you're supposed to do? Is there like a sort of a free market of salvation and theology out there? But again, this is the core of the problem. People are not accepting Allah for who he is. And therefore they're saying, well, this God, this Lord, he's not what I want in a Lord. Therefore, I'm just going to reject his existence and go do something else, or maybe find something else. So, for those of us who are Muslims, we should obviously be wary of failing to meet Allah's expectations of us. All right, this is obvious as Muslims, because we've been talking mainly about unbelievers. But as Muslims, we should be wary of failing to meet Allah's expectations of us. But we should especially be wary of falling into the trap of changing those expectations. For example, if performing the 5 daily prayers is an obligation, and performing the night prayer in Ramadan is a recommendation, right? So performing the 5 daily prayers that's fard, right? That's an obligation. You can't get around that. It has to be done. Whereas night prayers in Ramadan are recommended, right? You're not sinful if you don't do it. Would Allah be pleased with someone who neglects the former but never misses the latter? Right? The priorities are wrong. So you have people who they might not even pray during the whole year, but in Ramadan they're praying Tarawih every night. that's your priorities are all messed up. You're doing supererogatory acts and neglecting obligations. And I threw in this example, said, does wearing a necklace with Allah's name on it compensate for not praying at all? All right, which is, again, a trap people fall into. People, and this is, again, goes into what I said in that podcast about Islam as an identity. Right? There's people who identify as Muslims, but they don't actually fill out the obligations of being a Muslim. They don't care about the theology, they don't care about the fiqh, but they'll have a big beard, or they'll wear a headscarf, or they'll have Allah's name written somewhere on something that they wear, or whatever it is, or maybe they'll have an eye of the Qur'an written on their wall, or something like this, or the Basmala, or something like identify as a Muslim. But that's you're not doing what Allah's commanded you to do. These are just embellishments. You're not carrying out the core obligations that Allah expects of you. So, Allah has made His expectations clear. He has said in the Hadith Qudsi, which is the 38th Hadith in the 40 Hadith of Imam al-Nawawi, may Allah have mercy on him. So the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, and this Hadith is rated by Imam al-Bukhari, this is the translation, my slave doesn't draw closer to me with anything that is more beloved to me than that which I have made obligatory upon him. And my slave continues to draw nearer to me with supererogatory acts until I love him. And when I love him, I am his ears with which he hears, his eyes with which he sees, his hand with which he grasps, and his feet with which he walks. If he asks me, I grant him, and if he seeks refuge in me, I grant him refuge. And that's it. That's the hadith. That's what Imam Bukhari. That's the statement. Look at the first sentence again. My slave does not draw closer to me with anything that is more beloved to me than that which I have made obligatory upon him. That's the first step. The first step to draw nearer to Allah is the obligations. Fulfill the obligations. And then you draw nearer through what? The supererogatory acts, the recommended acts. Then you draw closer still. But how are you building a relationship with Allah where you're jumping over to supererogatory acts and completely neglecting the fundamentals and the obligations? So, as I wrote here, is this strange in any way? Would a woman love her husband if he beautified himself but failed to provide? Would a child love his father if he received fancy gadgets from him but inadequate food? Would a consumer be pleased to receive a beautiful package with nothing inside? Right? It makes perfect sense. Again, there's certain things, for example, of a husband, there's certain things that a husband's expected to do. He's expected to be a provider. He's expected to be the breadwinner. Does it matter if he's handsome and he works out and he's healthy and all these kinds of things? Great. But what about these fundamental matters of being the provider? Would a child love his father if he received fancy gadgets from him, inadequate food? I mean, what's the good of having the latest iPhone, whatever it is, if you're hungry? Or would a consumer be pleased to receive a beautiful package with nothing inside? So, I think also, before I go into the conclusion here, or maybe I'll read the conclusion and then add what I wanted to add. So this final paragraph. May Allah make us all better believers, which means that we ask Allah to make us better in our relationship with Him. We ask Him to make it easier for us to meet His expectations and to constantly respect those expectations. Furthermore, we ask Allah to grant us success in all our relationships, to only let us be in healthy relationships, and to let those relationships flourish through expectations being clear and expectations being met. And with Allah is every success. Yeah, the point I wanted to add here is also what Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayah 186. And I have the video on the channel. Allah knows what is good for you. And this is a tafsir from Imam Muhammad Wali Sha'rawi about the nature of dua. That yes, Allah will answer your du'as, but maybe Allah will not answer your dua in the way you want it to be answered. maybe that dua is going to be delayed. Maybe what you're asking for is not actually khair for you, so Allah is withholding it from you, because that's what's good for you. So I'd recommend that listeners watch that video as well. So I'll post that link below. Alhamdulillah, we've reached 25 minutes. I will wrap up here. If you find this content to be of benefit, please like, share, and subscribe. Inshallah, I'll keep producing more podcasts. I'll do more translated videos in time, translations of the Maraja, of the authoritative scholars. Inshallah, more books will be coming out. Please consider getting a copy of The Big Step. It's still available. It's on Amazon. It's on Lulu. And I also would say this. I'd also open like I said last podcast, I'm open to suggestions to produce clips from previous podcasts and put them up. I'm also open to suggestions about topics for podcasts themselves. If there's any ideas you want me to talk about. And I'm also thinking about future books. I have some translations in mind, but I'm also thinking about what kind of books I want to write in the future and keep going, and just trying to share whatever benefit I can, whatever Allah allows me to do. So with that, I will sign off, and I will see you all soon on a future podcast, insha'Allah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.